I've been gone for a while, and while I was gone, apparently Jhin became the #1 ADC in the game for like 3 or 4 months. He got nerfed last week, but he's still a top 4 ADC right now. And while I was gone, a lot of people kept asking me if Statikk Shiv was actually good or not, so I'm gonna go explain the advantages and the disadvantages of Statikk Shiv. I kind of already knew what it would be when it came to Jhin, but then I played it for like 20 games and I was like, okay, it's basically what I had in my head. And now I'm just gonna be giving you guys the details of everything and to explain, when you should build it and when you shouldn't and what you should be buying instead. And I'm gonna be explaining all of it in great detail with a bunch of other like Jhin knowledge that a lot of people are missing out on when they're making like decisions on what to buy on him and how to play him and stuff. So, first off, it's important to learn that there are two distinctive playstyles of Jhin before I get into items. He's a very old champion, like 9 years, but these two playstyles is something a lot of people don't piece together or even think about or even realize how big of an impact it affects the Jhin on your team or you playing Jhin on your team and how useful or useless you end up. Don't mean to interrupt, but I'm going to tell you a quick word from our sponsor, Opera GX. With Worlds happening and Arcane right around the corner, Opera GX has done a collab with Riot and has introduced a Riot Corner into its browser. You get access to it automatically by installing one of the official League of Legends mods, which all come pre-installed if you download the browser using my link in the description. The LOL esports section comes with weekly highlights, a schedule section to keep track of all the matches, with the calendar adjusting automatically to your time zone so you never miss a match, and a co-streamer section that gives you easy access to all the co-streamers for Worlds. With GX mods, you can customize your browser more than ever with just one click. You can choose between the LOL esports team, Kayonte, Lee Sin, Renata, Renekton, and more soon to come. These include background music, keyboard sounds, opening and closing tab sounds, theme and colors of the browser, mod-dedicated wallpapers, and much more. GX is also equipped with an import tool that allows you to quickly import all your settings from your previous browser to GX to make the switch easy, including browser history, bookmarks, and cookies. It's also compatible with every Google Chrome extension. It also comes with a built-in ad blocker, free VPN, RAM, CPU, and network limiters, Twitch and Discord integration, and much more. Check out the link in the description. Thank you. So the first one is the most impactful playstyle, which is you play hyper aggro snowball lane bully Jhin. And you're essentially gonna be playing very similar to how you would play Draven, except you're longer range and you have to reload instead of catching axes. You want to play for your level 1, 2, 3, 4 advantage where you're just constantly bullying them, suffocating, being in their face, trading, poking, fourth shotting, all of that stuff. And then you just slowly build up leads with HP trades, getting them low, and then you eventually just kill them on their tower or kill them in the middle of lane, and then you snowball, and then you snowball, and you snowball. And these are the Jhins that you will usually have on your team just feel super useful, where they're just kind of like deleting people mid game, deleting them late game, getting like 10, 15, 20 kills per game. That is the ideal Jhin. And whenever you have a not very useful Jhin, it's usually because they're doing the second playstyle. And the second playstyle is the one that you're going to be seeing very commonly in your games, and it's why I've learned, like, the general player base is like, can you please not pick Jhin? That champion's garbage. He does no damage. And I'm going to explain why that ends up happening very, very often. And this version of Jhin is basically just utility safe Jhin, where you're just going to be playing like a very long, wonky reloading Ashe, and you're just playing super safe, playing far back, farming, poking. You're not really trading aggressively. You're just spamming abilities to help your team or do utility, stuff like that. And overall, your damage will be lower. And sometimes it's going to be a lot lower. Like pitiful mosquito levels of low damage, where you're just not really pushing your strengths in lane. You're not snowballing. You're kind of just farming, and sometimes you're farming great, sometimes you're not. And because of the lack of like snowballing and having a lead, people can just easily dive you and get you behind and kill you. While one of the things that I've learned of playing Jhin for like 9 years is when you are ahead in lane and playing aggro, it's way harder for them to just do whatever they want because if they try to do anything to you, you just kill them. Three, four people diving you, you probably kill two, three, sometimes even four of them, depending on the situation. They try to engage a 2v2, doesn't matter if you have to reload, you're gonna win that 2v2 because you have like a 1, 2, 3 kill lead. But when you play the safe utility version, especially in solo queue, you're kind of just gonna be left to father for yourself, basically. Out of these two very distinctive playstyles, the most popular one for pro play is utility safe Jhin. Because in pro play, they don't need Jhin to do damage, even though that is a preferred outcome. They just need Jhin to be safe, not die, stay alive. Follow up with your team. W to catch people when your teammates catch someone, or when you catch someone, your teammates can catch them, and then use R when it makes sense, and etc. etc. And the reason why you don't have to worry about damage is because you have four pro players on your team. Your mid laner, your jungler, your top laner will usually all have decent outputs of damage. So even if you are below average damage for a Jhin because you're just playing safe and not like Giga Snowball compared to solo queue, it's fine. That's what they want, and that gets the job done. But in solo queue, you can't really do that. In solo queue, you have four animals on your team, sometimes four other animals on your team because you might decide to play a little bit like an animal, which I do sometimes, and you cannot rely on your teammates to carry every game. You can't play safe every game and just be inactive and just farm safely and not trade and stuff like that because people who play Jhin like that usually end up just being useless, worthless, no damage, no snowball, no farm. They just die all the time. And that kind of feeds into the stigma of, oh, can you please not play Jhin? Not pick Jhin? That champion is useless. Obviously, the last few months, I feel that stigma isn't as, prominent. But at least before this year, the last like 2, 3 years, it's kind of like, oh, my teammates are mad at me because I'm picking Jhin. I mean, I don't blame them because most Jhins just play super, super safe, but that's the reason why Jhin is usually useless. If you have a useless Jhin, it is most likely because he's not playing as a lane bully and he is not trying to play to win his lane. He's just trying to play to not lose. And when you're playing not to lose, you're usually just going to lose. So, very important that in your solo queue games, if you decide to play Jhin or you have a Jhin on your team, try to encourage them to play aggro because that is what you will need. Now that we understand the two different play styles and as well as which one's preferred in solo queue and which one's better fit for pro play, okay, now we're going to get into the pros and cons of both of their items and how they interact with Jhin, which one benefits Jhin more, and what's their purpose in solo queue and what's their purpose in pro play. So first off, we're going to start off with Statikk Shiv. The pros is that it has 50 AD, gives a little bit of wave clear when you kill minions, gives 4% movement speed. When you do the calculations, it's going to translate to 13 flat movement speed, up to 19 movement speed if you have tier 2 boots, and then other synergies as well. The cons is 35% attack speed, no crit, no lethality, no hard damage passive. The takedown passive isn't really consistent, and most of the teams aren't going to be grouped up that hard for it to be worthwhile. And the build path is just not great, especially when you're trying to play for lane and be impactful. Those are all the pros and cons, but now we're going to get into the details of how these interact with Jhin. At least for like the wave clear on minion death, if you are experienced with Jhin and you play him a lot and you get really good at him, you will realize that your wave clear is basically the same with or without Statikk Shiv. And I've noticed Statikk Shiv makes a big difference in, wave clear for Jhins that aren't experienced. So if you're a experienced Jhin player, you have high farm, you usually snowball a little bit, you're pacing your items at good points throughout the game, and having a lot of AD to just wave clear minions easily, then you don't really even benefit from that from Statikk Shiv anymore. It's just like a little bit of like just an extra thing. So that pro actually just becomes like irrelevant after a certain point of just being familiar with the champion. Definitely not a con, but it becomes less of a pro when you learn that. The 13 flat movement speed, it is a pro, but it's not a big pro. It's just a very, very tiny positive, and then when we start to compare it to what we get from Collector, you're gonna start to see the massive differences in just like the benefits from one to the other when it comes to Jhin. Now we're gonna get into the cons because I didn't really give that many details for the first few, but this one's gonna be pretty big. 35% attack speed. So a lot of people they don't really know how attack speed interacts with Jhin, and I'm gonna show you guys in the practice tool over here. If we hold it, it says in addition, Jhin gains 9% bonus attack damage. Jin's critical strikes deal 14% less damage, but grant him 14 movement speed or 14% movement speed for 2 seconds. Now we're going to hold shift. And over here you can see the ratios. So the ratio is like 30% of your crit chance gets converted into percentage, and then Jhin gains that percentage for bonus AD. And then he gains 25% of the bonus attack speed as a percentage for bonus AD. And then for the movement speed, it only gets affected by attack speed, so 40% bonus attack speed gets converted into movement speed, but only when you crit. So I'm going to show you me buying them right now. We're going to go get Statikk Shiv. We have 175 AD. I'm going to get Collector. Now we have 173 AD. And you just see how insanely irrelevant that 35% attack speed is on Jhin for like the first 30 first 30 minutes of the game. Because you don't really benefit from the crit or attack speed in your passive until you have more and more and more and more AD. That's why it doesn't make a difference right now. However, there's a big difference between like, yo, do you want 25% crit or yo, do you want 2 AD? Obviously, 25% crit is going to be way better to have than the 2 AD if we're just like choosing between one or the other. Not including the fact that like this thing will just scale over time. So over here, we're going to go back to Statikk Shiv. Over here it says 28% movement speed for 2 seconds. And then when we go to Collector, it says 14% movement speed for 2 seconds, right? So we're going to go back to Statikk Shiv, and Statikk Shiv gives you an extra 14% movement speed, but only when you crit. Now here's the thing, you don't have crits on Statikk Shiv. They removed that at some point this year, I forget. And the only time you're going to get that crit is with your 4th shot. So it kind of just becomes like a stat that you can sometimes use, but even when you use it, it's not really going to be that big of an impact for you in the early game. And again, no crit. So you have no crit, which means when you buy any second item, rapid fire or IE or whatever, you're gonna have 25% crit, which is an insane difference compared to like let's say Collector IE where you have 50% crit. And over there you start to notice the difference in AD too, because like I said, crit and attack speed, at least when it comes to Jhin's passive, it scales over time depending on your AD. And Rapid Fire has no AD. So, and it has attack speed. And again, you're not going to benefit from this attack speed until you get more AD. And then over here, you notice Rapid Fire gives you like 25 AD, roughly. Like 20, 24 technically. And then when we sell that and go Collector, i.e. we go from 199 AD to 271. And we also have 50% crit. So you're just able to reliably auto and crit often and get your DPS up and everything. The last thing is no lethality. So you have no lethality, and in exchange for having no lethality, you have the attack speed, and for no crit, you have the movement speed. And lethality is a stat that you can use as soon as you go into lane with it. It's going to make a big difference in your poke, in your trades, in your all-in, in your snowball, in your momentum. It's essentially like the best early game stat you can get for Jhin outside of just buying chunks of AD. And then if you look over here, the attack speed, movement speed, it just doesn't really provide you anything for the laning phase. It doesn't really let you do what you want to do. And that would be all of the pros and cons for Statikk Shiv. And since I already mentioned a lot of the things for Collector, we're just going to do a brief summary. Where it's like, yeah, the pros of Collector is 50 AD, 10 lethality, 25% crit, and then you have the execute. So all of those are things you can use right off the bat to make yourself useful, threatening, damaging, snowball, impactful, you know, all of that stuff that you kind of want to do as an ADC. The cons for Collector really is just lethality. Like, if you buy lethality and you don't snowball and pop off with it in the early game, you're essentially just it's gonna be useless mid late game as soon as someone buys like a little bit of armor, and if you don't have like Lord Doms or Mortal to remove a chunk of their armor and then apply lethality. Because how that works is it applies the armor pen from the Last Whisper items, and then it applies the lethality. So lethality is still useful mid to late game as long as you're not behind. Alright, we're gonna go through some stats real quick. This one was 2 months ago when I recently started playing League again. After I used Statikk Shiv for like 10 or 15 games because everyone was hyping it up, I was like, this does not feel good. It's kind of bad. It just doesn't play to his strengths, and I'm not winning as much as I should be. I only had a 45% win rate. Then I just switched back to Collector, i.e., 80% win rate, winning almost every game, super impactful. When I get a lead, basically the game's just over. 16 kills, 17, 20, 19, 12, and then even the games where I'm not like getting leads or popping off, I'm still doing so much damage that I am being a very like useful member of the team and like helping us win. But when you go to Statikk Shiv, it's kind of like the opposite. It's kind of like you're just really not helping sometimes, even when you're ahead. And then I use this guy as an example that I just found in solo queue, someone who's just building Statikk Shiv Rapid Fire and Statikk Shiv IE. When I see this person ahead, they're just not doing that much damage compared to what they should be, so their team's just lacking damage either way. Over here, 1 and 2, they were behind. He had 5k damage, which means he's just farming and then also autoing in fights, but the build just does no damage. So if you're behind, you're basically worthless. And then over here, not as bad, but when the 0-7 Zyra's out damaging you, or the 4 and 13 Kiana Intin is almost doing the same amount of damage, like that's an issue. And then over here, he went Statikk Shiv IE, which is better than Statikk Shiv Rapid Fire, but he's almost getting out damaged by his Sona. If he got out damaged by his Sona, he would essentially be the lowest damage in the entire game, outside of the enemy Senna, who's just building tank items. So yeah, and then when you compare it to some of my recent games, like over here, uh, I'm winning, I'm ahead. We lost a game because I have tilted teammates, but it's fine, it's whatever. But I did 51,000 damage, and then in this game I did 29,000 damage, highest damage. Shui and Tom were doing a lot of damage as well. They almost caught up. And then this one, 40,000 damage, 23 kills. And the biggest difference is that guy's a good Jhin player. I'm a good Jhin player too. But the biggest difference is that I am building a build that helps my champion be useful, get leads, and close out games, and just snowball, do a lot of damage, be a useful, functioning member of society. Statikk Shiv does not let you do that. And then if we look at the stats for this patch, Statikk Shiv 46% win rate, Collector 51.5% win rate after the Jhin nerfs, and then the pros are starting to go Collector as well because they're realizing that Statikk Shiv is not good. To be honest, the biggest reason why Statikk Shiv had like a decent win rate for all of these months in solo queue is because Jhin has been strong for a while, and people realize that. So even though Jhin got nerfed, he's still strong. but now he's not strong enough to cover over the fact that Statikk Shiv is just not that great on him. So now if you want to start winning with the nerfed version of Jhin, you have to go build useful items.